I'm not entirely sure how successful this video is going to be because I haven't really worked out what I'm going to say, but I've known all day that I wanted to do this video, so I'm just going to try and see how it goes. I've got a few scrappy notes down there, which is kind of worrying because the subject I'm going to get into feels really big and broad to me, so I may not do this too eloquently. But basically, last night I was surfing YouTube and I came across a video about silence in the craft and in paganism. And then it got me started on this roller coaster of video after video after video on the same subject. I became completely enthralled by the different opinions and the different ways that people perceive silence in the craft and the different ways people perceive its power. Which is really strange because it's not really a subject that I've ever delved into massively with my own practice and with my own beliefs. I've always organically been quite silent about my practice and about what I actually do when I'm doing ritual and stuff like that. Not because of any great paranoia or, like a lack of desire to be judged, but just because it seems natural to keep that stuff to myself. But so it's never really come up a lot for me as an issue. And last night I was taking a look through my tarot forecast for the week, which I wrote last Sunday, and I was just having a look what it would say for Thursday, and weirdly it said, be careful who you share information with. And I didn't understand that at the time when I wrote it, but now I think it might have been a perfectly synchronized thing whereby I've come around last night to this idea that I need to think about silence and I need to think about what it means to me. So the first thing I want to say is that I think that we're all pretty bloody lucky that silence has not been very, very strictly adhered to by the witchcraft community, because the internet is such an incredible resource to turn to, and a lot of times when people on forums or people face to face have said to me, how do you feel that you can develop your spiritual growth, or how do you feel this person can move beyond the 101 stuff? One of the first things I always say is go and talk to other people online. Go and talk to other people about their paths and about where they've been and where they're going and how they've dealt with certain problems that have come up for you. I mean, none of this would be possible if we hadn't have realised at least a little bit that silence is not always constructive. I mean, it's given pagans and witches a voice, it's given us a wider community, it's helped us to understand that we can stand together, that we can take from each other, we can learn from each other. We don't have to necessarily have conveniently found a British traditional coven. Life doesn't work like that anymore. We're all over the place. We're everywhere, from like Scotland to the arse end of Australia, and we can all come together in this incredible forum that gives us all a chance to talk and take from each other, which is great. And another thing, a great thing about the internet, is that it allows you to have so much more than the average bookshelf would do. I mean, trying to progress spiritually through going into the bookshop and having a little look at the mind, body, spirit section of Waterstones is not going to get you anywhere near as far as going on YouTube and having a look at some of these incredibly dedicated people who have made videos that have basically explained so much about their path in particular, but about paganism in general, and just helped people, young people particularly who are only just getting into it, to understand that there's so much more out there, that they don't just need to buy the Llewellyn 101 because that's what's available to them. It's been blown wide open, and in a lot of ways that is very, very good. I think some of the videos I saw last night did express the concern that if you are talking very openly about your path, your pagan path, and your opinions about stuff and your experiences with stuff, you're maybe risking unfairly influencing somebody who's young and just coming into the fold, or only just thinking about what their direction is, and instead of going out and having those experiences for themselves and learning for themselves, what their element is or what their path is, they're instead turning to you and just being completely overtly influenced by you. And I noticed a few people saying last night that they didn't want that to happen and they didn't want that responsibility. My opinion there is that somebody who's looking to be unduly influenced or domineered by another point of view is looking to have that anyway. They're just that kind of personality. They won't want to put the work in on their own. They're going to want to get to the answer, without really asking any questions, or maybe they just don't want to go that deep. They just want to skim the surface, and it's useful for them to have other opinions around that they can kind of take from, but they don't really want to go through it themselves. They don't really want to experience it themselves. So I don't think anyone needs to worry about unduly influencing anyone. If somebody wants to be unduly influenced, that's what's going to happen. But generally, I think the internet is a really great resource for a lot of reasons. So I think if silence were to have been the order of the day, we wouldn't have had everything we've had now. Having said that, I do think that there is a great difference between being silent about your orthodoxy and being silent about your orthopraxy. Being open about your beliefs, about what they actually are and how they're defined, and maybe how you label yourself, and maybe how your path has progressed in that way. I think that that is pretty innocuous, really. That's harmless. I mean, that's just, you're expressing a point of view, but you're not giving any details of what you personally do from the heart space, as I like to call it, to put that orthodoxy into practice, if you see what I mean. So, you know, I could say that I'm a pantheist, that I'm a pagan, that I believe in XYZ theory, that I believe this about deity, and I will get into all that on this channel. And I've kind of skimmed the surface of it with my blog a little bit, although I'm very cagey because silence comes quite naturally to me. So I'm only really just starting to expose my belief system to other people. But that kind of thing, I think, is much more academic. Whereas exposing your orthopraxy, exposing what you actually do during ritual, or what you actually say during ritual, what your conjurations are, or, you know, what kind of relationship you have with deity, for example. Those things, I think, are where it might become, for you personally, a little bit more problematic not to be silent. And I think that's probably because a lot of the time there's this opinion that a lack of silence diminishes the power from what you're doing. I think that this idea, particularly with hard polytheists, where they say, you know, that's just between me and deity. I don't want to talk about that with other human beings. That's between me and Athena or whatever. That kind of idea that not being silent or not having some kind of respect for the power inside something to the point where you would just chat about it on a street corner or whatever, that idea that it diminishes the power, I think that's something that comes from your own mind, but I think that doesn't make it any less true. Like, for example, for me, I feel that if I was to openly expose some of the stuff I say, do and feel during ritual, it may diminish the power that I feel is invested into it when I'm doing it in the ritual space. It doesn't matter whether it does or it doesn't. If you think it does, it does. And if you think it doesn't, it doesn't. If you see what I mean, it's a state of mind. If a witch feels completely and utterly comfortable with blowing open their whole ritual process and showing you what they wear, actually filming it maybe even on the night, filming it for you while they're doing it, showing you their tools and how they consecrate and whatever else, if they feel that that doesn't diminish the power of their ritual working, then it probably doesn't, because they don't think it does. You know, they still feel that it's incredibly charged with whatever it is they need it to be charged with, and that's fine. But if you start to feel that you are becoming a little bit of an information slut and you're giving out too much, and you feel that that demeans the process, or it demeans, you know, what you feel about your spirituality inside, pay attention to that, take heed of that, because if you feel it, then it's going to be true, you know. It's like they say that a positive attitude changes the outcome. I feel exactly the same about ritual working. I think if you don't feel comfortable that it's yours and that you can rely on it and that you can be passionate about it and that it's, you know, it's not open to malice or open to being tampered with, if you don't feel that way, if you feel that it's somehow unsafe, then it will become unsafe because of the hole you feel in your psychology regarding it. So that I would say about the difference for me. And I definitely, at this point in my life, am ready to get into sharing my orthodoxy, but not necessarily so much my orthopraxy. Like, for example, I would share how I prepared for ritual, and I would share how I feel about ritual. Would I share the ins and outs of the ritual? Probably not. You know, not for any other reason than I think it diminishes something that's deeply spiritual and personal. I mean, thinking about why I'm breaking my own silence, I started the blog last October, and it was literally only supposed to be a tarot blog at that time. And I've been into tarot for a long time. I've been studying tarot for 14 years now. Absolutely so passionate about it, and it's just something that's always going to be in my life. But then steadily as the blog went on, I realised that I wanted to write little things about my spiritual path. It ties in with tarot so much. I can take tarot on a purely professional level. I can do it for somebody as a self-development tool. It won't have any esoteric or spiritual content attached to it. It will purely be about finding the right direction in a kind of a counselling setting. But for me personally, the way I use tarot, I use it in a much more spiritual sense. I do use it purely for self-development as well, but the lines are always blurred with me. And I also use it for things like dream work, kind of solving that riddle, active imagination and visualization, which I'll go into at another point, exploring Jung's archetype theory and stuff like that. And that all lends itself massively to my spirituality. So I don't think I could have gone on for that long writing about tarot and trying to put forth the knowledge I've gained about tarot without at some point addressing the fact that it flips over into my spiritual nature. So I have written 1 or 2, I think maybe 3 or 4 posts now on the blog about my spirituality, but that's it. I haven't really even skimmed the surface of it, to be honest. I've always been quite cagey and quite kind of closed about it. Again, not in any paranoid sense, just because I feel it's so personal to me. I don't need to go on about it with the wider world. I don't necessarily need my friends to know anything else about my spirituality aside from the fact that I'm a pantheist pagan, that's it. My best friend, for example, absolutely love her to pieces, would die for her tomorrow. Does she know that much about what I do on Samhain? No, not at all. She knows how I identify spiritually. That's it. We don't need to go into any great detail, and I'm sure if she was curious she would ask me, and I know she's completely cool with it unless I'm crucifying babies, which I'm sure she assumes I'm not. So yeah, I am naturally very silent, organically very silent. The reason I'm breaking that silence is really 2 reasons. The first, I'm becoming increasingly fond of going onto YouTube and listening to other pagans and witches talking about their path. I find it fascinating, and I'm just finding it increasingly more fascinating. And I joined a couple of pagan forums in the last year or so after spending pretty much the whole time that I've identified as pagan, which is since I was 12, being comfortable with being pretty solitary and just following my own nose and reading the books I want to read. That's a long time to not feel any massively strong desire to connect with other pagans, aside from obviously talking to them at the Henge or Avebury when I've been. Just meeting them at sacred sites, but you know, never really wanting to get together for moots or get involved with debates. Not really. I am a very solitary practitioner, so suddenly there's this thing happening in me now in my mid-20s where I really want to engage with that and be curious and understand what other people are doing and what other people think about their own path. And I'm loving that, and it kind of feels a little bit like I'm lurking now, like I'm stalking. Like if I don't start a channel and start talking about myself, then it's just going to get weird, because I'm enjoying the massive amount of conversation and information that's going on from other pagans, but I'm not putting into it, and that it feels a bit weird at this point. So that's one reason I've started. The other reason I've started is because my ex-boyfriend was not too kind about my path. I was very vague with him about it. I skimmed the surface. I didn't really go into great detail. But at one point or another, it did come to some kind of argument about my path, and he was raised Christian, and I think that might have been part of the issue. But basically I blamed myself. I blamed myself because I realised that I hadn't been honest about it enough from the very beginning, and I decided that for the rest of my life I was going to be as open about it as I could be without kind of getting myself into any hot water or, as I said before, allowing it to diminish the power I feel from it. So that was another reason why I started the blog, and why now, as an add-on to that, I've started the channel, because I feel like if I really want people to understand who I am, they need to know that I pull no punches when it comes to my spirituality. I'm not going to apologise for it. I'm not going to try and hide it away. And this seemed like sort of the perfect way to express that. So there are some of my thoughts on silence, and thank you for listening if you managed to get to the end.